This is Marketing Uncomplicated. Today on the show, I'm joined by Sam Millunchick, a former combat medic and a rabbi who has dedicated his career to helping founders and executives navigate high-stakes communications. Sam's journey is anything but linear. From the battlefield to the pulpit to the boardroom, he's honed a rare ability to guide people through some of the most intense mission-critical conversations of their life. Whether it's a founder pitching investors, a CEO addressing their team, or a leader making decisions under pressure, Sam has built a reputation for bringing calm, clarity, and impact to moments when words matter most. Sam, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I always like to take a step back just to uncover your background story a little bit so folks can get to know you and how you really landed to where you are. So being a combat medic is such a high stakes environment. What lessons
Mhm.
about communication did you carry from that experience into the rest of your life and where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So actually, I think the biggest one that I've ever learned has been in that context. When you're in that situation, right, and things are very difficult, you don't exactly know what's happening. There are teams all over you surrounding you. You don't know where exactly the people that you're supposed to be fighting are. The way that somebody comes across on that radio and the calm in their voice or the panic in their voice makes all the difference in the world. So I really learned then, if you have a medic screaming down the line, nobody's going to understand what you're saying. They're not going to understand where you are. They're not going to understand what you need. So you learn to have that calm, that composure, that ability to sort of detach from the situation that you're in. And, yes, there's a person who's bleeding here who needs your help, but you can't help them if you're frenetic and frenzied and yelling and everybody around you gets, really sort of jacked up as well. So keeping that calm, the smooth, how does that guy say, the FBI guy? The 70s radio voice, keeping it calm and
Yeah.
smooth. That's really the key.
I
Chris
love
Voss,
that.
that's his name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I've always had a thing for radio voices just from listening from like one channel to another, and the different
Mm.
types of personalities. So that's really an interesting thing. But also love where you talk about disconnecting from the situation that's happening because I think that that's key. It's almost like you take yourself out of the situation and you in essence become the messenger into what's happening at that point in time.
You're not even the messenger, you're the creator,
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
things happen to us in our lives that are neither good nor bad, right? So you might say to somebody, "Oh, you got hit by a car. Was that good or bad?" And that will really depend on where they take their lives from that moment. What did they learn from it? What did they go on and do with that thing? I think a perfect example of this is somebody like Special Olympics participants who've been injured in combat or something like that and have then gone on to transform their lives. If you said to them, "Was it a good or a bad thing that happened to you?" The answer would not be universally that it was a bad thing. So when you come on in that smooth communication, that calm communication, that detachment, you change how people experience reality,
Yeah.
right? If you're on the battlefield and your commander is yelling and screaming and scared, you are yelling and screaming and scared. And that's a fact. That's how your body reacts to the situation. So it's much more even than uncovering. It's creating.
Yeah. No, I like that. I actually was hit by a car, funny enough,
Oh
but
my
not
goodness.
really
Okay.
funny enough. I was crossing a road at I think I was 16 at the point, and I was going to a workout class with a buddy of mine, and she actually got hit, and then that pushed me, and I slid on the ground, and we kind of fumbled around each other. But what it taught me was we actually went to the workout class after, I think because we were younger. And one of the biggest fears we had was our parents weren't going to let us out, and like allow us to walk to, the workout class and have that freedom. So that was a big fear for us. So we continued on with the workout class. And then, we were both scratched on the sides of our body. Like it was very obvious. And people were like, what are these two people doing in the class? Um, and we eventually ended up doing all the medical checkups to ensure we had no internal bleeding and so on and so forth. But it made me more spatially aware than I think you are at that age, right? And I think it's the concept of this could never happen to me, right? And so I think
Mm.
it really taught me early on to really be aware of my surroundings no matter where I was, and to know that you have no control even if it's a red light of somebody coming out of nowhere and in split seconds, because it was a red light and it was our right of way to walk. So very interesting on that side. Switching over to your rabbi life,
Mhm.
how did becoming a rabbi shape the way you think about human connection and leadership, and how does that play a role?
So a very similar story to tell here as well is so the last 3 years that I was a rabbi, I just retired. I did 100 funerals in 3 years.
Wow.
And at one of the funerals, I have like a formula for writing eulogies. I would always try and say three things about that person's life that sort of tied into what their overall mission was. And there was this one family that I spoke to that couldn't say anything good about their mother.
Oof.
They didn't. I don't. It's not that they didn't like her, but they just felt that she lived a very impoverished life. Maybe she was trapped in her marriage with her kids. They didn't really have anything to say too much about her. But when I took that again, it's a matter of creation, right? In the communication. So I looked for the kernel that they could take away and remember about her, which was not how they previously thought. And what I came up with was that she was a hero, right? There's a quiet heroism in devoting your life to your family and your children, and not looking out there and saying, I need to be this amazing person. I need to have my name up in lights, but actually staying at home, taking care of your kids, staying with them through the tough times. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, I never thought of my mother as a hero until now. Thank you for giving that to me.
Wow.
That's communication for me. It's like the way that I use my words can shape your reality. So it's exactly the same as the message I took from from combat medic to being a rabbi was exactly the same, just in a different context.
Yeah. So that really, I mean, an incredible story there, and kind of sad at the same time to not be
Mhm.
able to have seen their mother in that light or through that lens while they were still alive. But would you consider then that way of communicating the through line between what you've picked up from being a combat medic as well as a rabbi?
Yeah, without question, right? I mean, I grew up in a religious family, so we always would hear in school that your words are important and they're powerful, and as a kid, you sort of just throw your words around cheaply. But as I've gotten older, I've come to realize that actually the words that we say. So, for example, right? I have 5 kids, and most of the time I'm saying to myself, "Oh my goodness, I have to do this. I have to do that." And then my wife will say to me, there are people out there who would give their right arm and leg for a kid. Like look at the blessing. It's not that you have to, it's that you get to, it's that you're privileged to, you're blessed to. And so the words that we use really, really shape, everything that we do, even the words that we tell ourselves.
Yeah. No, I like that she switched that because it really shifts your thought process when you think about that you can versus
Mhm.
that you have to. Because a lot of people in any situation in life may not have the ability to do something, but that's why they have to, but being able to have that is pretty awesome. I like how she created that shift in that thought process.
Absolutely. That's why I'm lucky to be with her, for sure.
Yeah. So moving on into what you're currently doing today, and
Yeah.
as I mentioned in the intro of, you specializing in high stakes communication, just for the audience, and I'd love to learn a little bit about what that means in actuality and that positioning of high stakes communication.
So I mainly work with executives and startups, and they both those two categories of people find themselves in situations where the outcome matters a lot to them.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to define high stakes, right? It's not necessarily that their lives are on the line, but it's that they feel like their lives are on the line. They feel like, take an example. I work with somebody, a woman at Invesco, and she felt like every time she stepped into the room to give a presentation to her peers, they weren't taking her seriously. And so for her, everything is high stakes because she wants to be taken seriously. She's new at her job. She is looking to make a good impression. So high stakes really just means when you care about it a lot. And so I work with them to try to structure their communication, give them tools to both communicate effectively, but also deal with their body language, the way that they're showing up in the meeting, their physical presence, because that makes actually a lot more of a difference than just what I'm saying. It's also how I'm
Mhm.
saying it, and am I nervous, and how am I showing up?
Now, there are I go to a lot of talks, and I go to a lot of talks through, a variety of different topics, right?
Mm,
I went recently, I would say about a couple of months ago, to, a pretty interesting a psychotherapist. He's pretty well known in the industry, and he's older. He was on stage probably for about 3.5 hours, and I didn't even see that time pass. So what I want to know, because I know that there is some type of hypnotism, I feel that sometimes that these speakers are can enable in terms of how they really deliver their message, or maybe the way they communicate, that really draws you in as they're going through the process. And there was no frills. He was just a man walking on stage, had a high laptop table where he had his laptop on, and when he was just randomly thinking of things, he would go and type in, it would come up on the screen to be able to connect you to the conversation and the storytelling. A lot of what he did was storytelling, right?
mm.
But I was so enamored by, all of a sudden, when he was like, God, guys, he's like, we're actually a half an hour over our time, right? And it felt like it had just started. So I,
Yeah.
I want to like hear your perspective on how some of these speakers really captivate you for such a long period of time when they have nothing other than themselves standing on stage and talking.
So it's important to distinguish between different types of communication. What you were doing, I would term, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, edutainment, right? You went there to be educated, but also be entertained. And there's a very big difference between that type of speaking in public, which you can profitably do for 2, 3, 4 hours. And I would say reference any podcast that's long form. It's exactly the same thing, right? It's a long conversation where you sit there and you say to yourself, I could just pass 2 or 3 hours and I didn't even realize, right? So that's one type. That's an edutainment. But the type of communication that I'm more interested in is the boardroom presentations, the funding conversations, the things where I can't talk for 3.5 hours because nobody will listen. They'll be gone. They'll be doing something else.
Yeah.
That's more persuasive communication. So I mean, I would ask
Because
you.
they have to be there in a way.
Well, no, they don't have to be there. But again, I was just gonna say, like, I would ask you from that 3.5 hours, do you remember, let's say, 5 things that he taught you, and
Yes.
could you apply them?
It's not that could I apply them, but it was, to your point, it's education in the sense of connecting the dots to like things in my life where I was
Mm,
like, oh, I've always been wondering about this. And I was like grasping at things to make connections to.
right.
So I
W-
think that's what
w-
he does well then.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, that's not persuasive communication. Persuasive is I walk into a room and I want you to do something.
So like a TED
Okay.
Talks, you mean?
No, not even TED Talks. I walk into, I want money from you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I need to speak in a way which is going to get you to part with your hard earned cash or the fund that you've raised or whatever it is. And so, for example, the longer I talk, the more confused you are. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
The less clear my one message is, the less you're likely to do something. It's exactly like in marketing, right? If you have two CTAs
Yeah.
on a website, then each one, it's not that you've split them 50-50, it's that you've probably cut your conversions by 75 or 80% because people get confused.
Yes.
So that's the difference between persuasive, which is one message, very clear, short and to the point. You only say what you need to say, and entertainment, lectures, that kind of thing, where sky's the
Yes.
limit.
Yeah. No, I love that. And thanks for bringing that, because I think that there is, from a standpoint of marketing, and even when it comes to like a boardroom, whether it's a leader or somebody that's trying to deliver a message, what leadership is really trying to bring their team on board and bring the company on board, bring stakeholders
Mm.
on board, board of directors on board, and so on and so forth. So there is that level of persuasion, and similar with sales and marketing and everything that we do, when we don't necessarily have a presence, or sometimes we do if we have a message that's on a landing page, and how do we communicate in that little video for like 30 to 60 seconds and so on. So what do you think leaders struggle with in these moments today
Empathy. Um,
in
I,
terms of the
all
delivery of empathy?
well, so all good communication essentially is figuring out what the other person needs to hear from you and then saying that thing.
Yeah.
So there's a million ways to say anything, right? But if I'm a leader and I want to get you to do something, most of the time, or many times, what I'm going to do is say it's important because, and then I'm going to give you reasons why it's important to the company or to me. And a leader who leads with empathy says, I need you to do this. Of course, it's important for the company and it's important for you, but that's the subtext. What I'm saying is, why is it important for the person listening to me? Where is that? Where is the hook for the person who's hearing me as opposed to where's the hook for me? So I get up there and I say, the company needs you to do X and I need you to do X, meaning, okay, that's fantastic, but I may or may not do it. But if I can talk to you about you and your life and your story and what's important to you and why it actually makes sense for you to do this thing, you're much more likely to do it. So if leaders, that's like the critical skill for a leader to develop is empathy, care for their people, speaking to them from their perspective and not the leader's perspective.
And when you say that they struggle with empathy, do they struggle with switching that on to be able to hear what somebody is saying to deliver on empathy, or how are they struggling on it? Is what I'm
Well,
trying to dig
let me ask you
into.
a question. Have you ever heard somebody say, I'm paying them, they should do what they should do their
All the
job?
time, all the time.
That's a
not
lack of
not like
empathy.
me personally, but I hear from a lot of the clients that come my way, I gave X amount of money to marketing and I had zero return on investment. Now that's a loaded response because there's so many things that attributed to that from the back
Hmm.
end, but yes, so you said
Well,
that's a
so that's a response that shows a lack of empathy to me because people aren't just motivated by money, right?
yeah.
And just because you give somebody money doesn't mean that you own them. Doesn't mean that they have to do what you say. So there's this principle called reactance, psychological reactance, right? Everybody in the world feels it. When I tell you to do something, you immediately react in a rubber band fashion and say, I don't want to do that. Well, who are you to tell me what to do? Even if you're my employee, you're going to say that, right? And you know
Yeah.
you're the employee. So when the leader comes and says, just do what I say, or do it this way because I'm your boss, or I'm wielding my authority, even in a military context where that's like the stereotype, that doesn't work. Meaning it might work in that specific instance. Yes, I'll do this exact thing, but I'm not gonna love it. I'm not gonna do it again unless you tell me to. I'm not gonna go out of my way to be a good employee to do my job over and above. You're not gonna get the best of me. You're gonna get the very minimal amount.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. What then has been the biggest misconception about communication under pressure?
I think this is more of a nuanced thing. Meaning, you'll see some of the gurus will say it doesn't matter what you say, it matters how you say it, and some of the gurus will say it doesn't matter how you say it, it matters what you say. And the truth of the matter is that it's both. Um,
Say that
it's
again
both.
slowly.
Yeah, sorry. Some gurus will say it doesn't make a difference what you say,
Yeah.
just how you say it. You have to look good and be charismatic and say the right words and draw people in and the sort of JFK type rhetoric. Oh, another perfect example of this without giving political affiliations is Donald Trump, right? People don't listen to the content of the speech. They just he's talking and so they're going to listen, right? Doesn't even
Yeah.
matter what he says. On the other side of it though,
But they
there
pick
are
up
people
on
who's
sound bites though.
well, the people that don't like him, for sure.
Yes. Yes.
Um, And then the other side says it doesn't matter how you say it, it matters what you say.
Yeah.
So focus on the content and focus on making it meaningful to your audience. The truth of the matter is, it's both of those things,
Yeah.
right? It's saying something meaningful, but saying it in a way that people are going to listen to you.
Yeah.
So, as an example, right? Did you like maths in school, mathematics? Why not?
I found it a challenge until I got to the point of studying for my SATs when I met
Mm.
a tutor that showed me the tips that gave me tips and tricks to
Okay.
really understand that math wasn't a challenge. So like to your point, like and maybe you're going in this direction, but there are what makes a good teacher versus a bad teacher. No, I wouldn't say bad teacher, or what makes a teacher really sink into that person's mindset versus somebody who just comes to lecture, right? And this tutor really made me see math in a completely different angle that I had never seen. I used to fear math. I feared it for
Mm.
years, even walking into the SAT. But when I had the tutoring with her, and she showed me sort of the background of like how I could, maneuver certain things, and how there was formulas and ways, and to like to get to the end result. I was like, okay, this is doable. It's doable.
Absolutely. So the point I was going to say is exactly that, right? There's nothing more relevant to your life than math.
Yeah.
You're surrounded by it, right?
Yeah.
The computer that you and I are talking on right now is built entirely on math. Your phone, modern society, okay?
Yeah.
But we don't care about it. So on the one hand, there's something which is super relevant to us and is surrounding us and it permeates every aspect of our lives. But most people could not care less,
Yeah.
right? But then you get somebody, I forget what his name is. This guy has a podcast called The Joy of X. It's
Okay.
all about mathematics in life, right? And he's on fire with it. And then you listen to it and you're on fire with it. I
Yeah.
got to learn this stuff, right? Sign me up. So it's both the medium and the message.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I actually went to a comedian about a couple of months ago, and a lot of his comedy comes from mathematical like formulations and equations. And it is so smart and so witty, and you actually get it even when he goes into like deep methodology, and he's like, bear with me, but he connects stories, and then you're like, oh my God, this is genius. I mean, and it's
Absolutely.
it's it's really bringing mathematics to life. I also have PTSD because my dad used to put me in my room for hours and tell me to study like the fourth and the sixth and the seventh multiplication table, and he'd come in and quiz me, and then I would panic when he would walk in.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
yeah. How do you prepare somebody to communicate clearly when adrenaline, fear, and urgency is at play?
Yeah, so that's nervous system work. That's not content work, that's working on your body. And there are things you can do. There's breath work, specific types of breathing that, like if I had to pick a lever for the body, and I would say this is the closest thing we have to opening up the control panel in our chest and just pushing buttons, it would be breath work, right? You can really change your mindset. I would say, there are tricks like I'll give you a really cool trick. When people get anxious and nervous, they get hot under the collar.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what you can do is you actually the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet are heat sinks. You can take a really cold water bottle and just hold it in your palm and it will cool you down automatically. So there are levers, there are things that you can do to calm down. That's like immediate stuff. And then there's longer term mindset changes and understanding that when you get up in front of a crowd or in front of an investor, it's not an existential threat. You're not going to die if you get it wrong. So it's sort of like longer term and shorter term plays at the same time.
Yeah. I love that you say you're not going to die at the end, because I mean it's why are you worrying? I mean, a lot of the times when I get up and I have to, speak on a panel, or speak at at an event, and it's not a
Mm,
very large group of folks, but I think there also is imposter syndrome that plays a big part of, is my content relevant? Is my content right? Especially if you're delivering something that is new, that is different, that is something you've come up with. How do you mitigate that? Because that's a psychological, because now we've talked about body, but then there's the psychological play that a lot of people have, no matter who they are and no matter how many times they've gone on stage.
sure. So there's a footballer. I'm going to get his name wrong. Marcus, footballer. I mean, sorry, that was a European term. There's a
Yeah.
soccer player in Europe. Holland, I think his name is Marcus Holland. I don't know. He's one of the best penalty kick takers in the world. Okay. And somebody asked him after a particular match where he scored a penalty kick, they said to him, were you nervous? Or how did you feel out there? And he said something which was really revolutionary for somebody his caliber. He said, of course I was nervous.
Yeah.
Like, what did you expect? I'm a human being. Of course, it's a big moment, right? And that really is a trick to imposter syndrome is embrace it. Don't, the second that we try to stuff our feelings into the ground and ignore them and not give them any space, the more they bubble up inside of us without any sort of boundary or way of understanding them. They come out the weirdest places, right? Like if I would say to you, don't think of a pink elephant. The only thing you're doing is thinking of a pink elephant because
Yeah.
you're trying hard not to.
Yeah.
And so the thing to do with imposter syndrome is not to push it away, is to accept it. Oh yeah, I am an imposter. Okay.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah.
Or even better, so what? So
Yeah.
you're an imposter.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen? Um, and it's really walking down that line of thought with people and sort of saying to them, worst case scenario, walk me through it. You get up there, You forget your lines. I have a story. I did a funeral, and I messed up the names at the funeral. It happens.
Yeah.
You know, we're human. And the
Did someone
family,
correct you or after
they
the
did.
fact?
I corrected myself right away because I sort of knew that I had made a mistake, right?
From the facial
And
expressions?
yeah, you sort of,
Yeah.
you realize. And I had a good relationship with the family, and we were paired afterwards. There's nobody who's going to go through life pristine. But I guarantee you, by the way, that family does not remember the mistake that I made.
Yeah. Yeah.
They wouldn't
The
bring it
fact,
up to you.
yeah, the fact that you'll probably sit there and stew on it, they have forgotten about it after the fact. Yeah.
People are not thinking about you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it really is the same principle as before. The empathy principle. You always have to come at it from another person's perspective because they're not thinking about you, thinking about themselves.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. And a lot of the times for me personally, when imposter syndrome comes up and I'm like, you put yourself in this position, you wanted this. So
Yeah.
that gives me the courage to just, I went to a networking event today and they just went around like who's new here today. And it's like, I hate like having to raise my hand and speak in front of everybody. I did it. My heart was pounding still. And I still ask myself, why does this happen to me? And I sat back down and my friend was with me. I was like, I really didn't want to do that, but I push myself. I push boundaries with myself to
Mm,
really develop the courage. And sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm torturing me. This is me torturing me. So, but it's a way for me to get over it. And I feel like every time I do it, I just get stronger.
of course you do.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that's how muscle is built,
Yeah.
right? If you're going into the gym and you're lifting weights that you're comfortable with, you're legitimately just wasting your time.
Yeah.
So absolutely, it's about building that, pushing that window out further and further.
Yeah. And I like that you bring that up because it is true. I mean, if you do go and you're just lifting weight, you are wasting time. For me, it is the pinnacle start of my day. That time in the gym of me even just having small talk with my trainer and pushing the boundaries of her, kicking my butt is I leave there feeling like I'm the king at on top of the mountain and I can tackle anything for the rest of the day. And the
Mm,
world is still sleeping because it's so early because I'm there by 6, I'm out by 7, and half of the people aren't awake yet. And that makes me feel that I've already accomplished a big thing from the beginning of the day that catapults the rest of the day for me.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, and that's another big thing that I teach people about communication is that we're not just brains
Yeah.
sitting in a vat. We're embodied, and we have to pay attention to our bodies. So, like you said, get up early, go for a run, do a workout, get enough sleep the night before. These are things that are easy wins because if we feel better, we will think better, we will perform better.
Yeah. So I have an interesting question, and this is probably some filtering through of like the data of some of the people that you've worked with. Of the folks that have come to you that are maybe on the lower end of needing the most work that you can offer versus somebody who just gets it, for that person who really needs a lot of work to get them to where they are in a great position, what is that how long does it usually take for them? And maybe you have the same type of person and it takes somebody a shorter amount of time versus somebody else a longer amount
Mhm.
of time. I'd imagine because everybody is different and kind of processes things, but what is an average time span for somebody in that position?
It's a good question. It depends on where they start and where they want to get to. So communication is a thing you have to be working on all the time.
Yeah.
I'm constantly reading about it, constantly brushing up on my skills. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you I have no idea how to communicate. I'm just at the very beginning. So it just depends, right? For somebody to become decent, 6 weeks to 3 months, I would say. Again, if they're willing to put in the reps, if they're willing to do the homework, if they're willing to be uncomfortable, a lot of it depends on the personality of the person who's coming to me for help. I only ever work with somebody in a row for 90 days. That's like my outer limit. If you can't get it in 90 days, it's not a fit for you. It's not a fit for me. We're gonna part ways. But
What's
between 6 weeks and 3 months.
Which then leads to my question. So there are some people that just can't be taught it then. Have you run
No,
into that?
no, everybody can be taught.
Okay.
Everybody can be taught. There are people who won't learn.
So it's that click that's just not happening.
It's the click that's not happening, or it's them not putting in the effort, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's capable. The capability is not an issue, right? Especially for the people that I work with, they're all capable. They wouldn't be where they are otherwise. But it's the desire, it's the seeing it as important, it's putting in the work, sitting is going to the gym. Everybody can have a muscular, aesthetic looking body if
Yeah.
they put in the work.
Yeah. Now, from the standpoint of just pulling off from there, there's obviously different communication challenges. If you could maybe walk us through a case study of somebody that was one of the most challenging, but that actually came out extremely successful through your program and what that was like.
So without giving away too many details, I'm working with a guy now. So without giving away too many details,
Yeah, high
who
level.
high level, yeah. There are people who have less practice or who have less opportunity or have had less opportunity. There are also people who are less inclined to communicate in a particular way, right? So the thing that I teach is not just about face-to-face communication. It's also written, it's emails, it's the whole communication suite.
Yeah,
And so for this person, I actually said to him, we were talking about his writing, and he just doesn't like to write. It's not something I've been, I don't know if pushing is the right word, but encouraging him to write for about 2 months. And he sits down and he procrastinates. He procrastinates because he doesn't feel good writing, because writing is too difficult, because he doesn't like it. So at that point, there are crossroads. You can either push somebody to do something they're uncomfortable with, and you'll get to 60, 70, 80%. Or you can just say, okay, forget the writing. Let's work on your verbal communication, and we'll use tools to make your writing better.
yeah,
So what are we doing with him? We built him a custom AI that takes his transcripts. He just talks to his computer and it writes in his voice because he hates writing, but he loves
yeah,
talking.
yeah.
So it's about working with where you are and your sort of natural inclinations as opposed to forcing you in a particular way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you are creating tools to really support somebody's personality and communication challenges or
Mm.
styles that are really giving them the tools to work with, because in essence, I mean, let's face it, people aren't going to change, or maybe they will, to your point, maybe they'll do the work, maybe they won't, right? But navigating around that and finding creative ways as you did, which I love, like creating this, like, personalized AI tool that he could just speak into. I mean, that's genius. People would love that. Oh, I even know a lot. I would love that, even though I'm somebody that doesn't have a problem with writing, right? Just from a time efficiency standpoint. But I love that you work around the folks that you're working with.
So that's the beauty of having a coach. That's
Yeah,
why, I mean, could you learn this stuff by yourself? Without question. YouTube is full of people who are way better at this,
yeah,
academics and whatever. You can read books. The beauty of having a coach is somebody to say, look, I can see where you're going to be good at this and where you're going to struggle, and we can work on the struggle, or we can lean into your strengths, and we can do it this way and we can do that, and adapting on the fly. And that's why I think having that coach who is an expert in the area, who has done it before, it gives you that ability to just go with the flow. It makes it easier. It makes it more effective, if that makes
yeah.
sense. Which I'm sure
And
you've seen as well in your marketing work.
yeah, and it's a lot of the times that people don't recognize those type of things in themselves, and so
Hmm.
being faced with some of the challenges that you don't necessarily think is a challenge is also an interesting playback, I think, to somebody. So I think that's wonderful. For founders that are raising capital, I want to talk about founders raising capital and then executives leading teams, but specific for like founders raising capital, what's one mistake you often see in their pitch delivery? Because I think that this is interesting, right? I mean, it's coming from the standpoint of, all that I do is really to support, clients from a strategic standpoint to ensure that their foundation is in a good place, that their marketing, they can build up the numbers, they can get to do things like going out and getting funding and all that good stuff. But and I've worked with some pitch decks with clients that are going after funding, and a lot of what I see is that they just really don't talk about what they're doing in an effective manner at all. And they talk
Yeah.
about all of this other stuff and how the pudding is made versus what the dart is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
With the red dot around the circle, it's like they miss that and they're just going around and around and around and around.
Well, it's exactly the same thing we said before. It's a lack of empathy. So the founder is getting up there, and I don't mean it in like a pejorative sense. People are stuck in their own worlds, right? So the
Yeah,
founder gets up there, and he or she will say, like, I built this product. I'm in love with it. I need to show you every single thing about it because I've worked on it for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. I own it. And so they get lost in the labyrinth of how beautiful the thing is that they made. What they fail to understand is that the person that they're asking money from does not care.
yeah,
They couldn't care less. They're there for a specific reason. Will this investment make me money in 3 to 5 years, whatever your time horizon is, right? And more importantly, is this a person I can trust? And so they're there for completely different reasons. And so the founder focuses on the window dressing and on the features, and they're not talking to the investor who's sitting in front of them. What the investor needs to hear is, can I trust you? Are you competent? Are you gonna are you able to pivot if you need to? Are you the type of founder who has grit because things are going to get difficult? Your idea is nominally okay, otherwise I wouldn't meet with you, but you and I both know the idea is going to change. Can I trust you with that change? So the founder is there for a completely different reason
yeah,
or with a completely different set of assumptions. I think that's the biggest disconnect that I see.
yeah. And it's funny because I recently also had another person on the pod where he talked about that, you know, in the message of, I mean, this is completely different to what you do, but he's like, he's like, you go to a restaurant to eat sushi, nobody really cares where the sushi has come from, right? Unless you're going to like a three Michelin star chef, then you care about, maybe some of the details, but you lose people in the story. And you are right. It's the end result. What am I going to get in exchange for money? If I'm paying you $1,500 for your service, what's going to come out of that? And what is the goal that I'm going to achieve, or am I going to achieve that goal in essence?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are buying you, they're not buying your process.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and even if they don't know you, there's the ability to convince you. Um, to basically work with you and so on.
Mm.
So for executives, flipping that over to executives who are in-house, and maybe running large corporations or enterprise companies, what are some traps they fall into when communicating vision or strategy? I mean, it may be similar.
So there was this one executive that I worked with at a large nonprofit in London. And the biggest change that we made for her was I asked her to ask herself one question before she got up to speak.
Every time.
Why am I, every time, why am I speaking? Right? Why am I here? What am I hoping to achieve? Because you can very easily get up and just ramble and talk about whatever's on your mind, whatever's important to you. And when you force yourself into that funnel of, okay, I need to be effective here. What am I trying to achieve with my communication? That actually makes everything else much more effective, right? Once that's the case, she sat there and she said to me, I really don't know. Why am I here? What am I trying to say?
Yeah.
And if you don't know, I'm certainly not going to know,
Yeah.
right? The people, your team isn't going to know. And then you walk away and you're like, well, I just had this with a client. I'm doing marketing for a client. And we have a big presentation coming up tomorrow to the board, whatever. And he wanted to meet today. So we meet and he says, I want to see the deck. I want to go over, I want you to do the presentation with me.
Yeah.
I said, but you didn't communicate that you wanted to see the deck. You didn't communicate. So I think that people have all these assumptions about what they're saying, but they're not actually making them clear. And I think getting rid of those assumptions and speaking things out loud is much more effective, especially for an executive who wants their teammates or their team members or their employees to do something in a certain way.
Oh yeah, because they think it's automatic sometimes, I think in
Mhm.
that sense that, oh, you were supposed to give it to me before I have to deliver it or something, but they don't actually communicate it to you. And we work on multiple layers of, you need to, especially when it comes to work, of you needing to communicate everything that you need prior to something that you need to deliver. And that happens
Yeah.
way too often amongst teams and with work and stuff. In your view, what makes someone not just a good communicator, but a great one?
It's obviously content, saying what you need to say, being concise, clear, credible. The best communicators are the ones that have charisma, that have that presence, that show up in the room. And there's something I've gotten into recently, which is studying seduction
Mm-hmm.
and flirting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly like going on a date. The best people to go on a date with are the ones that you immediately feel comfortable with them. They have this presence, this presence that almost envelops you. It teases you. It makes you want more. It's magnetic. The best communicators seduce you. And that sounds strange, especially in a business context. Why are you talking about seduction? But we all like to feel special. That's what seduction is. Somebody feels special. They're interested in me. They
Yeah.
they are, they're putting me on a pedestal. They're playing with me. The best communicators do that too.
Yeah. And do you feel that, and let's talk a little bit about that because I think that there is a lot of interesting things as that relates to from the standpoint of it's not just the words that are coming out of your mouth, but it's the
Mm.
way you look at somebody, your body language, your gestures, do you move forward, do you focus and constantly look into their eyes versus looking away. And I'm somebody that as I'm thinking I look up in the sky. I'm sure you've noticed that, right? I'm not focused directly 100%. What are those little sort of tactics that really draw somebody in?
The absolute number one thing you can do to have a fantastic conversation with somebody, bar none, is ask questions. If you ask your conversation partner questions and allow them to talk about themselves and to answer your questions, and you're interested in them, you're asking follow-up questions and you're following side threads, that is the number one thing you can do to get somebody interested in you. And the research backs it up 100%. They do research in speed dating studies and all these other ones as well. And it's just about how many questions can you ask your conversation partner, and you're listening to them. You're not just, you don't just have a sheet and you're rattling it off. You're listening,
Yeah.
you're responding. That's the number one thing you can do to have a better conversation,
Hmm.
a better communication in general.
Yeah. And that plays in every role of your life
Mhm.
with everyone you're communicating with. I like that. Do you have good exercises or practice you use to help people center themselves before a big conversation?
It depends
Other
what the big
than like how
conversation.
you basically said this one woman before she goes up on stage, she asks like, "Why are you there?" I'm assuming it's a variety of different things for each client.
There are lots of grounding techniques, one of which actually happens to work fantastically well on my kids when they're having a temper tantrum. So if there are any parents out there, listen up also. You can locate things of different colors in the room that you're in.
Yeah.
So you sit there and you just, so when my daughter's screaming her head off, I'll say to her, find something red and just turn off like a light, right? So when you're, oh my God, I'm gonna,
Oh,
um,
so when she's
just,
screaming, you tell her find something red and
I
she
said, can you
stops?
find something red? And she just stops crying and starts looking around for something red. It,
Yeah.
it, it just, it shifts the mind away from ruminating, right? That's what
Yeah.
you want. You want to break the ruminating cycle, right? There's a book that has fantastic strategies for grounding called What My Bones Know.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a heavy book. It's about trauma and abuse and whatever, but it's her journey through to basically find how to ground herself in really intense moments. And at the back of the book, she gives all these strategies. That's one of them. It's unbelievable. Another one comes from an executive coach called Joe Hudson. I'm sure you've come across. He's like big on social media now.
Yeah.
He says if you have a difficult conversation, mourn the thing that you're afraid of losing
If you're
before
if
you have the
you're
conversation.
oh, if you're going to have a difficult conversation, mourn the
Mhm.
thing that you think you're about to lose
Exactly. So let's say that you need to go have a
because you
difficult
may not
conversation.
necessarily lose it.
Well, but also when you're like, think back to the time when you had like a crick in your back or something. When your body goes off kilter, it throws everything else out of whack.
Yeah.
And so the more you are focused on not achieving a particular outcome, the more you may well achieve that outcome.
Yeah.
And so what he says is like, if he had to have a difficult conversation with his wife, he would go into a separate room and mourn the loss of his marriage. And they're getting divorced and he's crying and he's let it all out. And then he goes and has a difficult conversation. So he's already felt what the worst case scenario could be is much more calm, much more
Yeah.
centered, much more grounded. So if you can do that, before a difficult or you're nervous or whatever, imagine everything going to pieces and mourn it. And then, well, it's already happened. So what's the worst that can happen now? You know?
And then just push yourself on stage in front of 3,000 people.
Yeah.
I love that. How do you personally handle pressure?
I used to get very nervous before talking in public. I mean, it was my job for a long time, so I worked through that pretty quickly. But I think the way I got better at it was just by doing it. I mean, the first sort of public lecture I ever gave um, was a memorial lecture for my wife's father. So we have this thing in Judaism where every year on the anniversary of the death of somebody, you learn a little bit in their memory, and that way you're perpetuating good things, in their memory. So when we got married, I started delivering these lectures, and I still remember the first one was like maybe 20, 25 people in the room, and no joke. Okay, I took a piece of paper, right, and I read for half an hour. I didn't look up. It was, I'm remembering it is painful.
Yeah.
And when you learn from and you get feedback and people are, you see people fall asleep, they leave the room, whatever it is, you figure it out, right? You learn what works, what doesn't work. And so by the end of it, it's like, I've already done everything that I've already made every mistake. I've gotten somebody's name wrong in a funeral. What am I going to be nervous about? I've already done it.
Yeah.
I'm still here. So my personal thing is like, how bad could it possibly be? It's already been as bad as it could be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. I mean, I think I was like I was following this one influencer who does really well speaking, and I think one of the biggest things that happened to her was she got on stage, and I think there was about 1,500 to 2,000 people in the room, and the tech died.
Yeah.
There's no tech. And I actually, when I think about it now, as I've been talking to you, and I think about like that's really not the worst case scenario, right? I mean, of course, like you need tech for somebody to be able to hear you, especially in a room that big. But she ended up walking into the center and really projected as much as she could until the tech came back, and really had the ability to culminate people in terms of versus being up on stage and come into the center where everybody was and becoming one with everybody, which led to probably one of her best speaking
Mm.
events because she had that process. And it's funny because even before I would listen to her, as I build into, becoming a speaker and getting up on stage, I have these visions of me being in the center versus being at the top of a stage and communicating. Now, sometimes you're not going to have the ability to be able to do that. But I think once, even when I do small lectures, I have a tendency to walk right into the middle and walk around people and stand next to somebody as I'm talking, because I feel like there's a sense of you being touchable versus untouchable and being able to be approachable in the sense of you're not there to speak at them, but you're there to speak with them and to really communicate that through body language of becoming close to them versus standing at a podium, even if it's 20, 25 people. And I've noticed that by doing that versus standing at a podium in a much smaller room, I've spoken for a half an hour and then got questions for 45 minutes. So the
Mhm.
return was a lot richer because I felt that there was that instant connection that I was one of them versus somebody that is coming in to lecture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what people really value about good public speakers is that they don't feel like they're being talked at. The best public speakers don't feel rehearsed. They feel like they're adaptive, they're connective. Exactly what you said. They're going with the flow. They're not getting up and delivering pre-prepared remarks that, they have like a laugh track and they're connecting, they're adapting, they're becoming part of the group in the room as opposed to outside of it.
Yeah, totally. Um, so what has your perspective, and I'm sure, I mean, the age old conversation of AI, and how are you using it? What is it? And so on and so forth. How do you feel? It's just something I have to ask because it's shifting and it's changing so much. But I love that you brought up the fact that you have this tool to help this particular client. But how do you feel, and what is your perspective on communication shifting as technology moves and shakes, especially now with I mean, AI has been around, it's just become louder right now. So what do you feel has been the biggest challenge in how you work through communication with your clients through the re-evolving of AI, I should say, versus birth of AI?
I would prefer the people that I work with not to use AI if they didn't have to, for a number of reasons, but mostly because, again, it depends on how you use AI, and there's a lot to talk about here in terms of strategies for prompting and getting your own voice in there. But
Yeah.
especially if you're using it to write, it's it's soulless. And another thing that I've become much more woo recently. Um,
By
I used to be like
AI?
very no, like in the age of AI, I've become much more woo. Yeah, it's really
Okay.
taken me in that direction. I used to be very rational, very focused on what's in front of me and the data. But then you realize when AI comes out, the thing that separates quality communication from the stuff that falls flat, it's almost like I would compare it to the timbre of a note in music, where it's the quality of the note, not just the note that's being played, but how it's coming across. And with AI, it just feels like there's something missing, right? So, and everybody can tell, by the way, that something's AI. Whenever somebody says, "And here's the thing,"
Yeah.
or "It's not this, it's that," it's, oh my God, I
Yeah.
don't want to hear the computer. I want to hear you.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the things that I tell my clients is like, look, there's one thing that you could give the world that it's never had before or will ever have since, and that is your perspective.
Yeah.
And using AI robs you of that. Yes, it's easier. Yes, it's faster. Yes, it feels like you're making more progress, but then you just become another one of the people who can use AI. And
Yeah.
what I want you to become is you,
Yeah.
right?
And then at that point you might as well have the AI speaking versus yourself speaking what the AI would be speaking.
Which, by the way, people do now, right? They have
Yeah.
faceless YouTube videos and they don't speak, they don't write, they just get the AI to do everything and generates the images. So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say that I sent you a card in the mail and it was handwritten and it was really nice. And you're like, oh, wow, he took the time. He sent me a letter. I really appreciate that. And then on the bottom, you see that it says printed by, handlettering.com or whatever, right? It was like a machine with a pen that wrote on my behalf.
Yeah.
You would feel like, oh,
It's
you
not
know,
personal.
yeah, I mean, part of what I valued about it was the effort you put in.
Yeah.
Part of what I valued about it was the care that it showed. Not everybody writes me letters. You wrote me a letter. I feel great about it.
Yeah.
AI is like, everybody now talks like a college graduate. So it's almost like I don't appreciate it anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I value the idiosyncrasies.
Yes. Yes. I mean, there are books that are coming out now that have been written by AI. And
Awful.
there isn't that like touch. And it's funny because there is an argument to be had that even with some of the biggest, as they call them, like the AI godfathers or the AI leaders of coming where they've come from, and digging into the direction of where AI is going, and talking about the loss of jobs and so on and so forth. I actually think, even as much as I hear these folks talk of, positions being erased, situations being taken over by AI, so on and so forth, that humans are going to crave more of the authenticity that we have been lacking over the course of maybe 10 years since the boom of the dot-com era, right? And really the boom of what this has done, and for those of you
Hmm.
listening, what the phones have brought into our lives, which is being connected 24/7. And the more I learn about what's happening to AI, the more I look around me, I've become so much more cognizant of when I'm at dinner, and I really look at who's actually having conversations versus who's actually on their phone or taking pictures of the food or taking photos and posting and so on and so forth. And it's probably like 5% is actually having a conversation. Maybe I'll give it 8%, right? But I think that as a community, as a being, I think we're going to move back in that direction of wanting to communicate. I'm an 80s baby. And I'm blessed to come out and have seen what the world was like before the dot-com era, before
Mm,
all of this technology. And it's a double-edged sword because it's granted us a lot, but it's also taken us in a different direction in terms of less connectivity. And I feel that people are going to look for more authenticity. And I think like the work that you're doing is not going to go away. I think it's actually gonna become bigger in that sense versus being taken over by AI, because I don't want news delivered to me by a robot. I don't even think I'll ever watch it. If I'm forced to and there's nothing else, and maybe that's my world, but I'll hate it.
right, right.
I really
You
will.
lose a certain richness, and I think to your point, the thing that's going to differentiate one of us from another one of us is going to be that those soft skills, that ability to connect on a human level, and that's really where the best people are going to make their mark.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree.
Mm.
Sam, I think you're doing some amazing work here, and obviously in a conversation under an hour, you just touched the tip of the iceberg. So I really appreciate the time and the effort, and we'll link all of your details and your contact information below. But before I let you go, we love to do something which is the fireside wrap up, where we ask one word, one myth, and one habit. So I'd love to walk you through that drill, and whatever comes to mind, just let it flow.
Okay,
One word. If you had to capture your approach to life on work in one word, what would it be?
empathy.
I like it. One myth. What's one myth about communication that you wish you could bust forever?
That there is a meaning that there's an arbitrary meaning that I put into words and deliver to you,
Mm,
right? The myth is that I have a message and you receive it. And
mm.
the truth is that we co-create meaning together in the space
Oh,
between us.
I love that. That's amazing. I love that. That's gonna be the quote that I post from this conversation. One habit. What's one daily or weekly habit that helps you show up as your best self?
Mhm. Not communications related, just in general.
In general, yeah.
Getting enough sleep.
Getting enough sleep.
Oh yeah. It you think better, you feel better, you treat other people better.
You just operate better
Yeah,
overall.
100%. a hundred
Yeah.
percent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you. This has truly been wonderful.
Thank you. Appreciate it.